Well-known gator hunter Troy Landry from the show Swamp People recently found himself in a bit of unexpected trouble. Louisiana wildlife and fisheries agents cited him following an undercover tagging investigation in St. Mary Parish. For years, Troy Landry was the man the swamp could not break. Viewers watched him face down massive alligators as if it were just another sunrise. The so-called king of the swamp made danger look routine. But in 2025, Troy encountered a battle he could not grab, shoot, anticipate, or overpower. It happened far from the bayou, where grit usually carries him through. Did you ever picture Troy Landry without control? Is strength really the same as power? What did the swamp give him over a lifetime? And what did it quietly begin to take back? Before the cameras, before the crown, long before reality television turned him into a household name, Troy was already living a life most people would never volunteer for. He was raised deep in Louisiana's bayou country, where being Cajun was not a brand or a performance but a way to survive day after day. In that world, the swamp was not scenery. It was work, it was education, and sometimes it was judgment. If you wanted food on the table, bills paid, or your family protected, you stepped into the water even when fear followed you in. Troy's childhood was shaped by generations doing the same risky work. Hunting alligators was not a thrill-seeking hobby or a dramatic adventure tale. It was tradition, passed down quietly, often without explanation because discussing fear was considered a luxury. Pain was expected. Cuts either healed or they did not. Injuries were dismissed with jokes and stubborn silence. When people speak about toughness in the bayou, they are not describing bravado. They are describing necessity. Would you choose that life if it meant accepting danger as normal every single season? By the time audiences met Troy on Swamp People, his identity had already been forged by years of risk that cameras never captured. The show did not create the man. It simply introduced him. That is where the irony begins to settle in. The swamp rewards toughness. It respects skill. It compensates those who understand water, weather, and animal behavior better than anyone else. But it never guarantees mercy. The same place that feeds you can turn on you without warning, and when it does, there is no apology. There is something else the cameras rarely show. Silence. In swamp culture, you do not complain. You endure. You keep moving. You show up even when your body is aching, injured, or worn down from years of pushing past limits. Is tradition worth inheriting pain if that pain slowly becomes invisible? At what point does survival stop being a badge of honor and start feeling like a trap? Before fame and recognition, Troy's life was already built on endurance without certainty. He learned to depend on instinct rather than comfort, on strength rather than safety nets. That mindset created a legend, but it also planted something fragile beneath the surface. If the swamp hardens you long enough, what happens when your own body begins to fail? When the hunter's body turns against him, the first real warning did not arrive as fear. It arrived as pain that would not leave. By 2021, Troy Landry was living with what he described as constant, around-the-clock pain in his back. This was not a soreness you stretch away or laugh about at the dock. It was the kind that follows you into sleep and greets you before your boots touch the floor. For a man whose life depended on movement, strength, and balance, his own spine had quietly become the obstacle. The man who wrestled alligators for a living could not outrun his own body. How do you process that when pain has always been part of the job? Troy eventually underwent back surgery. When it succeeded, the relief felt almost unreal. He spoke about going from nonstop pain to feeling none at all, as if someone had finally turned off a noise he had grown used to hearing. For many people, that would have been a sign to slow down, to reconsider limits. But the swamp does not reward hesitation, and neither did Troy's mindset. He survived, but survival always carries a cost. Then came 2022, and with it a diagnosis that changes everything no matter how tough you believe you are. Prostate cancer. There is no bravado that softens that word. Troy faced surgery once again, this time not for mobility but for his life. What unsettled many people was not panic or drama. It was how calm he seemed. He spoke plainly, thanked his doctors, leaned on faith and kept moving forward. Does beating cancer make you safe? Or does it simply remind you how fragile everything really is? This is where the story grows quietly uncomfortable. Troy did everything right. He detected it, treated it, and survived. Fans celebrated. Headlines called it a victory. And it was. But survival is not a reset button. It does not erase decades spent hauling heavy lines, bracing against powerful animals, and absorbing strain season after season. How do you deal with fear when your entire career has been built on running toward it? When he returned to Swamp People, Troy was no longer just battling the swamp. He was managing his body, listening for warning signs that had never existed before, and pushing through because stopping felt worse than continuing. Would you slow down after surgery and cancer, or push harder to prove nothing had changed? He survived pain. He survived cancer. On paper, that should have closed the chapter. So why did 2025 shake him anyway? By the time Troy came back from surgery and cancer, a different kind of pressure was building. Not physical this time, but reputational. In 2024, Troy Landry became entangled in something the swamp never trains you for. A regulatory issue. A gator tagging sting in St. Mary Parish that suddenly placed a local legend under a modern spotlight. Here is what actually happened. Authorities cited Troy for improper tagging of alligators, a compliance issue related to how harvested gators are labeled and documented. There was no dramatic chase, no violent standoff, no hidden criminal network uncovered in the marsh. This was not a dramatic fall. It was a collision between tradition and regulation. Still, when your image is built on being the king of the swamp, even a citation sounds louder than it might otherwise. Can a legend withstand paperwork? What did not happen matters just as much. Troy was not arrested. He was not banned from hunting. He did not lose his livelihood overnight. Yet headlines move quickly, and nuance rarely keeps pace. To the public, rules seem clear and simple. To someone raised in generational swamp culture, they often feel layered and bureaucratic. The irony is striking. A man who mastered reading water, wind, and wildlife suddenly found himself navigating forms, tags, and compliance codes. Is violating a regulation the same as losing honor? This moment mattered because it stacked onto everything else. Pain, surgery, cancer, recovery, and now scrutiny. Even though the matter was handled and addressed, it introduced stress that does not show up on television. Stress that follows you home. Stress that lingers in your chest when you are supposed to rest. How many blows can someone absorb before the weight begins to accumulate? On Swamp People, Troy had always been steady and unshaken. Behind the scenes, this was another reminder that toughness does not shield you from systems, policies, or public view.